Wow, what an amazing week we had. Could you do me a favor? If you were part of making Vacation Bible School a success, could you stand up from the smallest parts to the largest parts? Could you just stand? We want to welcome you and honor you today. This is amazing. Guys are my heroes. Go ahead, you can be seated. Vacation Bible School, man, it is one of my favorite weeks of the entire year because I just get to be a kid. I'm a kid all the time, but nobody notices at Vacation Bible School. I just blend right in with everybody else. And so I am super excited to share some stats with you. And really what these stats represent is life change, building a legacy of fully devoted followers of Jesus. That's our mission here at the church. And so to do that, I want to share last year's stats first. Last year was our very first year of doing Vacation Bible School. We were a brand new church. We launched in November of 2023. And so in 2024 of August, we had our very first Vacation Bible School. And so we had 55 kids. We had 16 kids give their life to Jesus. That never gets old. We had 72 people on our legacy teams. And we collected 50 backpacks and over 120 supplies. And then we gave them out at our back-to-school event that summer. And then so this year, I got to show you this year, we had 67 kids, 24 salvations, 77 people serving throughout our church. We had a goal of raising $500 to help some kids in Tanzania have a vacation Bible school. And yet we raised $800. Our kids did that, man. We need to be rejoicing and celebrating about this. It's amazing. And so God did this, and he chose us to be a part of this amazing journey. So listen, it's not too late. You can start thinking and planning, and maybe we'll even get the sign-ups up soon for next year. But what an amazing week we had. And so if you're joining us, we're just wrapping up our Legends series. We've been walking through the book of Judges. And so when you think of a judge, I don't want you to think of that person with a gavel and a black robe proceeding in a court of law. I want you to think of somebody who is a deliverer. And so the time period we're in, it's about a 400-year time period between Joshua and the incoming monarchies of kings. And so we've been slowly, over the past 5 weeks, picking out some judges. There's 12 judges in all. And so we are going to finish that up today. We're going to be talking about the 12th and final judge that we'll see in the book of Judges. His name is Samson. And perhaps you've heard of him before, right? If you were to close your eyes, what would you picture? Maybe it would be somebody who looked like Tarzan with big muscles, just, he's flexing, all that kind of stuff. But as we look in God's Word, we don't actually get a description for what he looks like. It doesn't tell us. And so maybe he looked like an average guy. Maybe he looked like he hanged out on the Jersey Shore. I don't know what he looks like. But here's the thing. It didn't matter what he looks like. It mattered that God was working mightily through Samson. But Samson was a complex person, if you've ever heard the story of Samson before. He was kind of a walking contradiction. Do you know anybody like that? Please don't look at the person next to you. That would probably be bad. It's not going to be a good afternoon if you do that. You see, Samson was kind of a walking contradiction because he was physically strong, but he was morally and spiritually weak, kind of like a jumbo shrimp or a civil war. Like, it just didn't quite make sense. He had so much potential in this one area, and yet he was lacking so much in another. And so there's a lot of ways we could look at the story of Samson. There's actually a lot of material. There's 4 chapters between chapter 13 and chapter 16. But we're going to kind of look at it today through the lens and the vantage point of revenge. Revenge. Say that like you're sinister. Revenge. Look at the person next to you like you're going to take some revenge on them. Say revenge. But don't actually take revenge on them. That wouldn't be good. And so as we look at this, we're going to see a pattern in Samson's life. That he kind of lives his life by saying, listen, I'm going to do it my way, not God's way. Years ago, I worked with two individuals that would be constantly pranking one another all the time. And the problem with that is when you have people that prank each other all the time, it just keeps getting one-upped and gets worse and worse, and the revenge gets worse and worse. I remember one time we had a snowstorm, and one of the guys was driving his car out in the parking lot, and the other guy took a snowball and he threw it across the parking lot, and the guy had his window open, and the snowball went in his car, and it blew up everywhere. Well, you think maybe the other guy would just throw a snowball back at him, but he didn't do anything at that moment. He kind of simmered and he waited, and after lunch, he walked into the other guy's office with one of those big black chunks of snow that kind of hangs out on the mud flap of your car. You ever seen that before? He had like a big ball, and the guy's office was carpeted, and he took it and he slammed it on the ground in his office. And this was the type of relationship that these guys had. And that's what we're going to see with Samson, that no matter what happens between Samson and the Philistines, it's the perennial enemy of the Israelites here, that it's going to keep escalating. It's going to keep escalating. And so we're going to start out together to give us a little bit of context in Judges chapter 13. Let's read the first 5 verses together. We'll unpack that a little bit. It says this in verse 1, "Again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years." So we see this is the 7th and final time that we see this phrase. Again, Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And so if you've been with us in this series, this has been a reoccurring theme. Remember, this season, this period of Judges encompasses anywhere from 340 to 400 years. And so there's multiple generations that are repeating the same mistake over and over again. And so when that happens, we've called it the cycle of sin. The cycle of sin. I'll put it up there so you can see it. It starts in a resting state where the people are walking with God. Things are good. But then sin creeps in. Rebellion starts to happen. They start worshiping some idols. Things go south. Some retribution happens. They start crying out to God, "God, help us. We repent." And so God sends in a rescuer to rescue them. He sends a judge. That's what a judge is. A judge is a deliverer. And so we see in verse 2, it says, "A certain man of Zorah named Manoah from the clan of the Danites had a wife who was childless, unable to give birth. The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, 'You are barren and childless, but you're going to become pregnant and give birth to a son.'" And so we see that Samson comes from the Israelite tribe of Dan. His father's name is Manoah, and his mother's name we don't know. And so we see that she was barren, and God often uses women in the Bible, and they don't have kids, and we have a description. And so we see that Sarah was barren. She wanted a child so bad. We see that Hannah was barren, and God gave her a child. She had Samuel. We see that Elizabeth was barren, and she would give birth to John the Baptist. And so that is no problem for God. He can work in those situations, and that's what he's going to do here. And so what we see in these verses here is an example of a Christophany, which is a visible appearance of Christ. A little bit later, we'll see, we don't have time to read it today, but it would list this angel's name as Wonderful. It's the same name that Isaiah will use to describe Christ in his book. And so we see this is a visible representation of Jesus before he came down in the flesh, that he would be born through the Virgin Mary. And so we see in verse 4, it says, "Now see to it that you drink no wine or other fermented drink, and that you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and have a son whose head is to never be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. He will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines." And so we see this kind of word jump out in the middle there. It's that word Nazirite. And so where that comes from is if we go back to Numbers chapter 6, we see what is a Nazirite. A Nazirite is somebody who separates themselves from the world and becomes fully devoted to God. And so they're separated from the world and they're fully devoted to God. And this was a vow that somebody could enter into on their own, perhaps for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, and then it would be over. But it was going to be a little bit different for our man Samson here, because from birth, he was to maintain this lifestyle for his entire life. And so we really see that there are really three tenets to this lifestyle. The first one is that he could not eat or drink anything from the grapevine. So no grapes, no raisins, no grape juice, no wine, none of that. The second one is no razor. You saw that, right? So he's got no fade going on. He's got to grow his hair and his beard long. And the third and final thing is that they couldn't be near dead bodies, dead people. Even within their own family, he must stay away. And so this was a sign for somebody that would be exclusively devoting themselves to the worship of Christ. And so we see that Samson is raised up by God to deliver the Israelites from their enemies. And so whatever God says will come to pass. So it's really important that we remember that. And he will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. And so let's skip ahead a little bit to Judges chapter 15. We're kind of look at the first 16 verses here, but let me give you a little bit of context for what is going on in the chapter before, in chapter 14. We see that Samson, one of his vices is he has a thing for Philistine women. And so a Philistine woman would be a non-Jewish woman, a pagan woman. And so the things that she values are very different from the things that Samson is supposed to be valuing. Remember, God has set him aside. He's supposed to be different from the world, and he's supposed to be set aside for the exclusive, devoted worship to God. But he had to have a Philistine wife, and so he told his parents, "Go find me a wife. Get me this woman." I know that sounds weird in our culture, but in that culture they had arranged marriages, so I kind of hopefully picture his tone to be like, "Hey, you're supposed to be doing this for me. I would like a Philistine wife." And they're like, "No, don't do that. Find somebody from amongst our people." But he did not listen. And so we see that this kind of 7-day feast and celebration takes place. And so in those times, there would be a 7-day wedding celebration. But really what it was just a big party where everybody used as an excuse to get drunk. And so they gave Samson 30 Philistine kind of buddies that he was supposed to hang out with. Now remember, he's not supposed to be drinking. It doesn't tell us whether he was or whether he was not. But you can imagine it was probably a pretty rowdy party. And so Samson tells them a riddle. And he's like, "Listen, if you can guess this riddle, then I will give you 30 sets of beautiful linen garments. But if it's the other way around, if you can't guess it before the end of the 7th day, you have to give me the same thing." And so they couldn't guess, and they started getting frustrated, and so they started pressuring his wife, and they said, "Listen, if you don't tell us the answer to the riddle, we are going to kill you and your family." And so in turn, she pressured Samson, and he eventually relented and gave her the answer. And of course, they come back to Samson before the end of the 7th day and say, "Hey, we have the answer." Of course, he's fuming mad and said, "Why do you plow with my heifer?" I don't think that's a good thing to call your wife, but that's what he said. Don't say that. Don't go home and say that. It's just a recipe for disaster, right? But he was angry because she had told them his riddle. And so he had to stay true to his word. And so he kind of went to a place where he found 30 Philistines. Instead of buying the clothes, he killed them all, took their clothes, brought them back, and gave them to the men. Crazy, right? And so he's furious, mad. He's so angry. He leaves and he returns to his father's house. He's disgraced. His wife has disgraced him. But then it takes an even crazier turn here, and we see that Samson's bride is actually given to none other than his best man. And so this is all setting the stage for future conflict. We're going to see that vengeance and frustration is going to continue to build in the life of Samson. This is just the first of many things in his life. And so it says in verse 1 of chapter 15, later on, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, I'm going to my wife's room, but her father would not let him go in. And you're like, why did he bring him a goat? Well, I guess it would have been like some flowers or a box of chocolates. He's trying to say, hey, listen, I shouldn't have probably got that angry. I'm back. And so he kind of brings a gift, and he wants to consummate the marriage. That hadn't happened yet. They've already done all the vows. It was pretty much legal, but because he had kind of gotten angry and took off, they didn't know where he went, and so he's back. He's trying to fix his marriage. And so his father-in-law says, I was so sure you hated her, he said, that I gave her to your companion, or to your best man. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Dads, don't say that. Come on. That's bad news. Take her instead. And so her father is trying to remind Samson, remember, you're the guy who left in anger. You're the guy who got so angry. Everybody knows that you have a problem with your anger, Samson. It's apparent. And so we see in verse 3, Samson said to them, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. And so now he's saying, I, me, I deserve it. The Philistines have humiliated me. They figured out my riddle because of my wife, and now my supposed father-in-law will not give me back my wife. He gave her away to my best man. Like, he is totally humiliated here. And so you may have heard the phrase before, hurt people, right? That's what's going on here. It's beginning to boil over. And so we see that in Samson's life, entitlement turns pain into permission for payback. So he's saying, listen, I'm hurting here. And so that's all the go-ahead I need to seek my revenge, to pay these nasty Philistines back. And so as we take a step towards entitlement, it is the fastest way to take a step away from God. Now don't forget, God has promised that he would raise Samson up to be a deliverer for his people to the Philistines. He doesn't need Samson to act all holy and all righteous and make this a personal vendetta. God was going to take care of it and bless Samson because he already said he was going to do that. But now Samson is making it very personal. And so it says this is always bizarre when I get to this verse. So he went out and he caught, get this, 300 foxes, and he tied their tails together. I would have loved to see that. That would have been crazy. Tied their tails together in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and the standing grain together with the vineyards and the olive groves. Like, I read that, I'm like, I have so many questions here. Like, first of all, like, where did my man get 300 foxes from? Like, we have some foxes by our house, and they're like, shh, have you ever heard of fox? They sound like a little baby getting murdered. I don't know what that sounds like, but I'm imagining, like, that's what a fox sounds like. He's screaming. We have one by our house. It sounds so eerie. But how did he catch 300 foxes? Did he catch them all in the same day or multiple days? Did he have people helping him? We don't have any of his details. And I started thinking about this. I started thinking about my childhood. And I remember we used to play this ding-dong ditch game where you'd get a bag and you'd put some dog poop, you'd light it on fire, you'd put it on somebody's doorstep, you'd ring the doorbell and run, they'd come out and step on it. Like he's the original OG for this game, except he was doing it with foxes a long time ago. And it hit me, I'm like, this guy is crazy. He is absolutely bonkers and vengeful. And so that's what revenge does. It escalates the cycle of destruction. They just keep going back and forth, and escalating. It gets worse. With every act of vengeance, it leads Samson to greater violence, greater self-centeredness, and he gets further and further away from God. That's what's happening here. He is separating himself from the plans that God had for him. God did not need him to get all self-righteous here. He was going to work through Samson, but make no doubt, he will continue to work through Samson's mess. His plans will still prevail. That won't change the outcome of our story. But Samson most likely will miss out on much of the blessing because he's trying to do it himself. He's trying to be his own God. He's trying to control the narrative. And so, of course, we see that the Philistines ask, who did it? Who did this? And they were told, Samson, the Timnite's son-in-law, because his wife was given to his companion. So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death. It's like, wow, bro, I just hit you and you just murdered. They're out of control here. And so the problem with payback is it actually never pays off. It never, ever pays off. And we get into this cycle, and Samson is getting himself into this cycle of revenge. And so in the book of Judges, we've been looking at the cycle of sin, but I want to show you the cycle of revenge. And Samson gets himself into this. And so we see at the top, it has that word rupture. I was going to put anger there, but I was trying to go with all the R themes that I got going on for the series. So there. But when I think of rupture, man, one time I went away on vacation with my wife, and when we got home, I heard a very distinctive sound of running water. That's when I went down to my basement and my hot water heater had ruptured, man. The water was going everywhere. What a disaster. But that describes what happens to our anger. It starts to boil over, and before we know it, man, it just ruptures, and we are angry. And then what happens? The next part of the cycle is resentment. Resentment starts to fester and set in. We start to premeditate things and start to kind of envision ourselves getting back at another person. And then finally, the deed happens. There's retaliation. I want them to feel like I am feeling. And then sometimes, but not all the times, remorse sets in. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's just a feeling of nothing. But whatever it is, we're like, man, I don't feel any better than when I started. I didn't get the relief that I was hoping to get. And then we have a choice at the end. There's either you repeat the cycle or we release it and give it to God. And so Samson's at the point in his story where he's going to keep repeating it. He's not at a breaking point yet. He's not willing to release his revenge. And so in verse 7 it says, Samson said to them, since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you. And I think sometimes all of us, we get trapped up because our revenge feels so righteous to us. We feel so entitled. But really, revenge is rooted in pride. You see, Samson thought he could handle it on his own. When we look at all the other judges in this book, they had armies, they worked with the Israelite people, they had commanders when they conquered their enemies. This guy, he is a lone ranger. He's working by himself. He's like, me, myself, and I will handle this. And so God raised Samson up to be a judge and deliverer of Israel. But he never intended him to do it by himself. And so in verse 8 it says, he attacked them viciously, and he slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and he stayed in a cave in the rock of Etam. And so we see that this cycle repeats itself, and it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And so we're going to skip over verses 9 through 13 here, but what's actually going on is the nation of Israel, his fellow countrymen, turn on Samson. They're supposed to be united against their enemy, the Philistines. The people that want to have nothing to do with God, the people that are worshiping pagan idols. And now he has two enemies. He has the Philistines and his own people. And his own people say, man, you are creating so many problems for us. He says, the Philistines are ruling over us, they told him. But think about that. That was never God's design and plan. They were supposed to be fighting back against the Philistines, and yet they're just taking it. This is how it is. They lost all hope. And so Samson says, well, don't kill me. I'll let you turn me over to them, but don't kill me. And so they agreed on that. So they bind him with some fresh ropes, and they bring him to the Philistines to turn him over. This is what it says in verse 14. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him shouting. So they see him coming in the distance, and they're charging forward like they're going into battle because they're so excited to finally get some revenge on Samson. And so we see that the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes of his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. I think it's so easy in life to trick ourselves into believing that our power and that our strength comes from ourselves. Like, man, I go to the gym 5 times a week. I'm fit. I'm healthy. I got this. I can conquer anything that comes my way in life. I got the right diet. I've read all the self-help books. But God makes it so crystal clear here that the Spirit of the Lord came down on him. Not just down, but powerfully upon him. It's just a reminder to us that his strength was not natural, but it was supernatural. It was all God, all of the time. Without God, we're going to see what happens next. Verse 15 says, finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it. So he's busted out. He sees the first thing and he grabs it. It's a jawbone of the donkey. And he struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said, with a donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men. And so we kind of see his narcissistic behavior here. It's almost like he's like a rapper, and this is his diss track against the Philistines. It's like almost like poetic. He's putting this into a little poem, like, look what I did, look what me, like, I'm the best. That's what he's saying here. Me, myself, and I. I'm the one-man army. And so as we get ourselves into Judges chapter 16, it's the final chapter of Judges, and perhaps one of the most well-known stories. It's the story of Samson and Delilah, right? Samson and Delilah. And if you've ever heard the story before, you know that Delilah deceives Samson. But Samson he succumbs to his own pride. Because she's trying to trick him. 3 times she's trying to trick him into giving her the secret to his strength. And 3 times he replies back with a lie, and he gets fed up. She is nagging and nagging and nagging, and finally he's just like, man, I got to get this lady to stop. And so he says, listen, if you were to cut all my hair off, I would lose my strength, right? You know the story. So she kind of lulls him to sleep, and the Philistines come and cut off his hair. And when he wakes up, he believes it's just going to be like every other time. He's going to get his revenge. But it says something so peculiar. It is the Spirit of the Lord departed from Samson. And so his strength was gone because it was God all the time. It was never Samson. He couldn't have done any of this on his own. And so they bound him with brass shackles and they gouged out his eyes. And they were mocking him. They kind of took him to the temple of their god, Dagon. I brought you a picture of him. He's this kind of fish man looking dude. He's kind of ugly. It's the god of fertility for the Philistines. Remember, they were a seafaring people. And they start to mock him and say, look what our God did. He kicked your God's butt, blah, 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 blah. And so that's where we pick up in verse 27. He says, now the temple was crowded with men and women. All the rulers of the Philistines were there. And on the roof were about 3,000 men and women watching Samson perform. So they're bringing him out. They're making a mockery of him. They're mocking God. And here's the turning point in his life. Don't miss this. Verse 28. Then Samson prayed to the Lord. Sovereign Lord, he says, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me once more. And let me, with one blow, get revenge on these Philistines for my 2 eyes. And so maybe you're listening to that and you're like, man, that is absolutely an imperfect prayer. And it is. Because you still see there he's holding on to his own pride. He's holding on to a little bit of his own vengeance. But this is the only place in Samson's story where we see him in a broken state. That he's crying out to God. God, I need you. Remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just this one last time. And so what would it look like if we actually reframed our hurt as an opportunity to return to God? What if we took that perspective, as we took our hurt and we looked at it and we said, you know what, God? I'm not going to let this define me the way the world wants it to define me, but I'm going to give it over to you. I'm going to return it to you. You're the author and finisher. You're the perfecter of my faith. And so, God, I'm laying it at your feet. And so I just want to give you a question today. God, how can you use this for your glory instead of my grudge? God, how can you use my pain for your good, for your glory, instead of me feeding in to my anger, to my frustration, to my grudge? What would it look like if we asked God that question? If we laid down our pride just for a moment, if we laid down our anger, if we laid down our unforgiveness, if we laid down our hostility, if we laid down our attitudes, what would it look like if God got a hold of our heart in that moment? Because here's the thing, even though it's painful for us, God can take something painful and make it something beautiful. For his glory, for his good. He can take a dark situation and he can help us find hope. Verse 29 says, then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood, bracing himself against them, his right hand on the one and his left hand on the other. Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. And so in Samson's final act of vengeance, it cost him everything. It cost him his very life. Revenge always, always takes so much more than it gives. And so what would it look like to step into a new season? Because forgiveness is the antidote to revenge. What would it look like to forgive ourselves? What would it look like to forgive other people, regardless of what their response was? What would it look like if we took that initiative? Because here's the good news in all this. Like Samson, we deserve death. We might not have done the things that Samson does, but we have done things that have separated us from God. And anything that separates us from God is sin. And so what would a cycle of forgiveness look like? Well, if it's like the cycle of revenge, it might start with a rupture, an anger, a frustration. But then we need to take time to recognize it. I think sometimes we skip this part, right? We're like, man, it's so painful, I'm just going to act like it doesn't exist. And we get this kind of false forgiveness thing going on. Kind of sweep it under the rug because it's so painful. But what if we actually take a hard, cold look at the truth and say, God, this is paining my soul. I'm hurting bad because of this. And I'm just going to call a spade today. God, this hurts. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. What it would look like if we would just cry out to God. And then we wouldn't be coy and just be like, yeah, I'm okay, leave me alone. But what if we finally just recognized that nagging pain that was in our life? What if we started with the truth? Because we're not going to be able to get all the way around this cycle of forgiveness unless we start with the truth. And then there's the beautiful release. That's the surrender part. That's what we see Samson did in a very broken way in his prayer. He was surrendering. He was waving the right flag. He's saying, you know what, God, I actually don't have this figured out. I am not in control. I am not God. You are. What would it look like to lay those burdens once and for all at the foot of the cross and say, God, I trust you with my most painful things in my life. That in that pain, you are working. You are not absent, you are present. And then there could be a restoration process. Now, forgiveness doesn't guarantee it, but it certainly opens up the door for that possibility. But regardless whether you're able to restore or not, you can continue to move forward because you are releasing it. You are surrendering it to God. And then the final part, this is so important, it's the renewal. That we would take the lies that the world tells us, that the enemy wants us to believe. And just like Samson, guess what? We are our own worst enemy most of the time, just like he is in this story. And so what if we started to systematically replace some things in our life that we believed that we thought was true with the truth found in God's word in who he says we are? We would actually be renewed. We would find peace. And peace isn't the absence of problems, it's the presence of God. He wants to give you that peace that only he can provide. It's not found in being vindictive. It's not found in punching somebody back just one last time to get one last hit in. The peace that you seek can only be found when you renew your mind in God's word, when you give it over to him. And so I want to put both of those cycles up there, revenge and forgiveness. And I want you to look at them for a minute because look, You can get all the way around here. And you can release it or repeat it, right? But look where the release is here. It's much sooner. And so like Samson, he was going round and around and around, repeating that cycle of revenge until finally he realized that he wasn't in control. He had to do something different. If he was going to expect a different result, he needed to do something different. And so he surrendered. He surrendered to God. And so can I just encourage you, don't be Samson. God will always be there. He's not going to disappear. But don't wait till you're on your deathbed. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait till next year, because that's not guaranteed. What if we chose right now as a church that we were going to release there instead of there? How would that change our posture? How would that change how we interact with others? How would that change how we dismissed an offense? Paul says this in Romans, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord." That's what he told, this was what he was trying to tell Samson the whole time. Like, I got it. It doesn't have to be this way, Samson. You don't need to insert yourself into every narrative. I am God. I'm in control. I've already decreed this is going to happen. I'm going to raise you up as a judge. You're going to help remove the yoke from the Philistines around your neck. I'm God. I've got this. Love what Jesus says in Matthew. "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." And so I think for me and for you, we need to ask ourselves this question: why am I playing judge? Why am I playing judge? Maybe today I just need to say, you know what, God, you are judge. You're the judge over my life. You're the author and creator. You are the finisher of it all. God, I'm going to trust you with that. And so the main difference that we see here between Samson and Jesus is this, is that Samson gave his life to kill his enemies. That's what he did. His very last breath was wiping out his enemies. But Jesus gave his very last breath for his enemies. It's the upside down economy of Jesus right there. He gave it all. He laid down his life for his enemies, for people like you and I who did not deserve it. We are far from God, just like Samson. But we have to get to a place of surrender, because until we can get to a place of surrender, we'll never see ourselves as a person who needs a Savior. Romans 5:8, "While we were still sinners, Christ died for us." While we were still sinners. While Samson was still sinning, God was pursuing him. He was chasing after him. He was coming towards him, not away from him, not against him. God was coming towards him. And so in just a moment, we're going to sing a song. It's our super old hymn. It's called "I Surrender All." And I just want to encourage you, as we sing this song, you're not singing it to the people in this room, but I want to encourage you that this would be an act of worship between you and your Creator. And if there's some things that you got to get off your chest, some things that you got to let go, to do it, to cry out to a good and gracious Father. He hears you. He loves you. He wants to be with you. He wants to spend time with you. He does not want you to do life on your own. You don't need to be Samson. You don't have to act like you have it all figured out. And so in this moment, I pray that you would just lay it at the feet of Jesus. Take those things and say, you know what, God, I'm not enough, but you are.